Hello everyone, I'm just checking my analytics. What? No. What? Anyway, what? The channel pages? Those channel pages? No, that's really mine. Really my page. Well, at least we've made a slight comeback, as well as a watch time. I think I was losing watch time for a bit. Yeah, I lost watch time, so we be trying to do. So I'll try to do more. Oh no, it's gonna be an epic view battle. This one, what is this one on? Who disliked that? This one is probably. Oh no, what's my video with the most Okay, yeah, I'm just looking at my analytics because I felt. Overview. Is it in? It's in. Is it in content? No. Audience. Yeah, it's an audience. Yeah, so we're writing on the. We're kind of writing off the big wave of however many of them is. So we're going to start off with the Yugoslav Civil War. Wrong. Okay, so Bulgaria invades Yugoslavia, but so separatists in Slovenia and Croatia are the first to attack, and then the national separatists and then the separatists in Macedonia actually attack the Bulgarians because they want independence and they don't want the Bulgarians to interfere with that. The pro-democratic rebellion easily gains ground, whilst this, I forget what this rebellion was. It's the Socialist Rebellion. The Bulgarians feel threatened by the Socialist Rebellion. Oh, misclick. Okay, back. And the Bulgarians invade the new Socialist Rebellion because they're afraid of a domino effect, wiping the socialists off of the map. Yugoslavia has a hard time cracking down on these revolts. Also, music. The march to the Bulgarians are actually ally themselves with this rebellion. Mainly because they're pro-democracy as they're under America's sphere of influence. So they think a democratic rebellion would be best to support the U.S. And that too, I guess. After the fall of Belgrade, After the fall of Belgrade, the rest of Yugoslavia falls under a military dictatorship, which ultimately choose to kick out the Yellow. They push back several of the movements heavily, and they push back the Bulgarians. But this military dictatorship and another socialist revolt occurs. Bulgaria ultimately pieces out with the separatists in Macedonia, and sides with the democratic forces to help kick out the military dictatorship. As a democratic Yugoslavia is empowered, but they are still unable to fight. But they are unable to stop the communists in time, and they're like, oh well, and let them off the hook. So, communist Yugoslavia, in the peace treaty, Bulgaria annexes some territory, but not much. Yeah, don't spam in the chat, please. I'll put you in timeout for a minute if you do it again. Yeah, if you spam, you get timeout for a minute. That's just how it works. So I think Macedonia would most likely side with the British as just free territorial guarantees. And then a new faction is formed. The Fourth International. Yeah, the fourth since the Soviets did it first. So the Fourth International. This is actually not a Kaiserreich reference. The Third International was a real thing. I think it, like, 50, I think 3 or 4. So, the first country to join, so it is now 1960, and after making a temporary truce, the fragile truce. So 1960 is the year that the fragile truce in Southeast Asia shall expire. The first offensive is taking this island and making an offensive into North Vietnam. So all of these countries are under U.S. influence. Yeah, the U.S. is intervening on the side of the North. So President William Noland ultimately lost re-election to Lyndon B. Johnson, who, fearing a domino effect in Southeast Asia, sends in troops. As the draft in as the draft into Southeast Asia begins. China, the U.S. and their allies mount a desperate attack. Mount an attack, pushing back. And the invasion of southern Burma begins as the new democratic regime installed in Burma after the Burmese Civil War pushes down into Burma in hopes of reunification. So the invasion of South Vietnam goes through. Though another offensive is made into northern Burma, British Prime Minister, I think at the time, Harold Macmillan, makes a decision to send their volunteers to support Thailand and Cambodia, and Charles de Gaulle makes a speech to support Siam and the ones and the places in the French sphere of influence. As the invasion of South Vietnam goes through, so Southeast Asia is ultimately the Southeast Asian War. Support for the Southeast Asian War starts to plummet in 1965. So, President Lyndon B. Johnson would win a decisive victory in 1964. And in 1968, Vice President Stuart Humphrey would pledge to finish the job in Southeast Asia. Now public support for the war would actually start plummeting at this point. But as Siam capitulated, Siam had capitulated, leaving only Cambodia and southern Vietnam too. The Southeast Asian, after being fully encircled by sea, South Vietnam would capitulate, and a major offensive was outlined, and then Cambodia capitulated, officially ending the Southeast Asian War. Now it's time to drop this peace treaty. To start, northern Burma finally reunited with southern Burma. Basically, that's basically all what happens in the peace treaty, except for, I guess, Laos. The French colonies in Southeast Asia united after the humiliating defeat. Hello again. So this is the post-Southeast Asian War, Southeast Asia. China was hoping that they would get some land, but they didn't. So, the thing is, no nation had ever set up spheres of influence in Mongolia, because it just was never talked about in the peace treaty. So, spheres of influence were made in, new spheres of influence were made in Asia. Also, now it is time for possibly the worst part. Now it is time for the decolonization of Africa. Which has been going on for a while, and none of you have noted. And we have never mentioned it, because it is quite because it's a controversial and complicated subject. So, basically, the colonial powers, the U.S. tried to influence in the background. The U.S. tried to use their influence in the background to forcefully end colonialism, which was an extremely controversial act. But nothing could be done about it. As that would as that would likely start a massive international squabble. And no one had the time or resources to deal with and no one in the UN had the time or resources to deal with anything like that. So Senegal was actually divided into two countries. So the decolonization of Africa was very slow, which is why we didn't cover it here. Also, I didn't I mean, though I think giving all of these nations independence, all of these nations were actually given independence because, the UN outlawed colonialism. Since this actually happened in our timeline, I'm actually gonna try and use my laptop trackpad to do this. Or actually, no, the mouse is better. The trackpad's better for doing straight lines. That's the Allies. A new alliance called the African Front is created. Which was mainly used so that the African nations didn't have to have spheres of influence. Which is mainly a thing because they don't want the African nations to be in another nation's sphere of influence. Which is the main reason why I created the alliance. So, the African Front will be represented with green. Every African nation except for Liberia joined the alliance. I guess, well, every African nation that wasn't in another nation, that wasn't in the US's sphere of influence, these countries will soon fall to another country's sphere of influence, though. Just, it makes the map more interesting. I do use Scratch for, like, for stuff at points. So, let's just do that. So, Africa is going to be, like, there's a lot of possibilities for Africa in this scenario. The French and the British, too, feeling bitter after their loss in the Southeast Asian War, decide to unite their alliance into one. So, now the alliance map looks a lot cleaner, I guess. That's really the only change. The alliance map looks cleaner. More nations fell. But still, more nations fell to revolution. Albania, Sweden, whatever, Tanutuva, Nicaragua, like in our timeline, and Sudan, the Congo, South Africa, Iraq, Iran, and Central Asia. So now we have a three-way Cold War. Again. The stream didn't end. A monarchist-backed coup occurs in East Prussia. So, the Kaiser is back, I guess. And then something unexpected happened. I mean, not really unexpected, but you get what I mean. So Israel and Turkey were invaded by Syria, Jordan, and Lebanon. Cyprus and Greece later joined the war. So this sparked a major conflict where the Middle Eastern conflict had begun. Which eventually sparked with the Caucasus and other nations joining in on the conflict. Eventually, as more and more European states joined, eventually France and Britain joined in on the conflict, which only made things go downhill even more. This means that the U.S., Mexico, Cuba, that's the U.S. too. This means that even more nations would start to join in on the conflict, ultimately turning it into this. And then as more and more nations joined, the faction leaders just called all the members of their alliance into the conflict. So basically, every nation, or actually, no, not yet. As every nation, nope, missed a spot. So as every nation, nope, missed a spot. Missed some spots. Huh. I keep missing places. Yeah, this should be all of that. Every nation, yeah, we're good. So World War III had begun. But that is not all. As as all the other alliances that existed. Like the Socialists. I mean the Fourth International. Oh yeah, and the alliance map, Sudan is united, so let's just say that all of those faction members join in. That's the only change, it's that there. But now, World War III is in full swing. So, this is World War III. We're not leaving this on a cliffhanger since we still have a while left. So, the first... So, let the conflict begin. I gotta find, music. Actually, this. So, into the conflict, the first push made in the conflict was pushing into Israel. They're stopped right outside Jerusalem. As this began, as a stalemate sets in. So, forces in Ethiopia and Saudi Arabia were quick to taking out of the Yemens. It's because they thought there would be a bit of trouble in there. As Yemen capitulates. Quickly, they invade up into Qatar, or is it Qatar? Also, yeah, they also invade Kuwait. So, They did what Saddam couldn't. So, it is now 1983. This war mainly started because of Ronald Reagan. It's actually more or less like the 1970s. It's like 1977-ish. So yeah, Ronald Reagan was elected in 1972 and re-elected in 1976. So we're in his first term as president. So the Reagan Doctrine still happens. The state of Crimea is quick to collapse because it's quite weak. Now, the Fourth International has yet to declare war, since nothing has happened that would provoke one yet. Sicily falls to Italy. So Naples and Sicily capitulate, then Sardinia and Corsica is invaded. Though Corsica is French. Same as Sardinia. So I guess they wouldn't capitulate. After the fall of Venice, Bavaria and Austria started a campaign in Italy, and then Italy capitulates. Oman and the UAE start pushing into southern Saudi Arabia. Nepal and Bhutan capitulate because they weren't really interested. So the Second Southeast Asian War began. Technically, this is just World War III, but I wanted to give it it is basically the Second Southeast Asian War. Thailand capitulates, and Siam is not really doing well. Like, Siam is not... Siam is not efficient. So, Siam just capitulates because they were scared of cluster bombs. Japan invades Sakhalin, and the invasion of Malaysia begins. As they push into Malaysia, Singapore falls, and now East Malaya has capitulated. or no, West Malaya. So now East Malaya has to be Chile. Forces push up into Sri Lanka, but are unable to push forward because of India, which mounts an invasion into Myanmar. And into China too. They're just pushing through mountains, basically, so... That's just mountains, and the invasion is easily repelled. So, big invasion time. The fall of India was not... Also, the fall of Manchuria. Well, that was quick. Fall of Mongolia. The invasion of Mongolia. And Mongolia is gone. Both Mongolias. The invasion of Afghanistan. Afghanistan's not really overpowered. Or anything. And now it is time for... And now the Canadians invade Alaska. The US and Canada being at war is probably one of the weirdest things that have ever happened, that has ever came across in this stream ever. And now it's time for a moose. And now it's time for a moose attack. Okay. Here's how the US versus Canada would actually go if we were being realistic here. Canada surrenders. Just, you know. Oh, strong. Take out some of that. And, yep. That was quick. Really, you know, Canada is easily beaten. The colonial powers are now out of the Americas, since they didn't really have much control there anyways. Catalonia falls. Because now the invasion of Britain begins. Now Britain got really scared and used a nuke. Or actually, they didn't use it there. They nuked Reykjavik with it, which really wouldn't do that much. because Britannia does not rule, because Britannia doesn't rule the waves anymore. Americana does. The native Irish welcome the Americans with, actually, yeah, they just welcome I mean, I guess not really the Americans, but like, just groups of several nations, since other nations did help. Like Mexico and Brazil mainly. The fall of Britain. The invasion of Cornwall goes ahead. Then they send a separate one out to Wales. United States President Ronald Reagan makes a speech once the Americans march into London. Or once London falls, since the Americans may march into London, actually, they might. After the fall of Britain, after the fall of Britain, Havana is nuked. In response, the Americans nuke Berlin. Oh, and Moscow, too. Just to really provoke them. Because, also, the invasion of Denmark goes through. To prevent... The UN was having people in the UN were definitely not having a good time. The Socialist Front declares war. The Socialist Front joins the war. I mean, the Fourth International. Why do I keep calling it the Socialist Front? After the fall of Baku, Azerbaijan capitulates and they start invading northern Iran. The Netherlands capitulates. It is now 1976, and Ronald Reagan and U.S. President Ronald Reagan wins re-election against I don't know, like, I actually don't know. Also, the British Prime Minister is hung. Though they're executed by electric chair. But the Queen of England is allowed to keep their position. Paris falls. And Australia and India are forced to mount a desperate attack to save them. They start by invading the Philippines. As well as liberating Southeast Asia and taking Sri Lanka back. And invading important launch pads. That's like whatever the name of this island is in Taiwan. They also invade Japan, which provokes the Japanese into using an atomic bomb. So they nuked Wellington with it, or Auckland, or whatever. Which they get a harsh response. The nuking of Tokyo. I think it's the correct spot. And Japan surrenders. Okay, so we're back, and these aggressive acts were met with a harsh response. New Delhi is nuked. And then Jakarta. This led to the nuking of Mexico City. And some troops funneled across the Atlantic Ocean to take Puerto Rico. And then to invade Cuba. And then the U.S. homeland is invaded. The invasion of the invasion of the homeland of America was one of the toughest battles in world history. As Florida was invaded, they also invaded Florida. So also Florida man died. So the Battle of Richmond begins, and the Outer Banks fall. The Battle of Washington, D.C. begins, and we're playing. The British government in exile proclaims that this was a deserved action for the Americans. But, but there's something you gotta know. San Diego was nuked. In response, this was kind of just to force an American surrender, so in response, the U.S. nuked Madrid and Warsaw and Minsk and Oslo too. As they chose to push forward, they invaded Albany. The U.S. government has relocated to Houston and is fine for now. It is now 1980, and the U.S. faces a big problem. That's the problem. Mexico capitulates and forces start invading from the south. Now, of course, the Americans would just crush this invasion, but, like, the U.S. government now has to flee to LA. Also, Chicago fell. And The invasion of Alaska goes through. Korea falls without any nukes dropping. And the invasion of China goes through. Now, the US, using whatever was left, now, the US was in disarray. So now they used a bigger bomb this time. Used it on Bordeaux. In response, Seattle was nuked. As it became clearer and clearer that, as it became more likely that the red team was going to win the war, or I mean, the British and French were going to win the war. The US tried to get East Prussia to do something. So Kaiser Louis Ferdinand. Kaiser Louis Ferdinand the First gave orders to the military to invade Poland and West Prussia. As they enter Berlin, in East Prussia soon. So East Prussia reformed, and so East Prussia became the second German German Empire, or the third technically. the Fourth International has done a bit of pushing. First into Turkey and into Yugoslavia. So they've taken out most forces in Europe. So yeah, the Fourth International quickly gained a monopoly over all of the other alliances. As the rest of New England fell, the red pushed into Washington. But America never surrendered. The U.S. starts to massively push back the red team, kicking them out of the Americas once and for all. It was a close call. It was a very close call, as hundreds of thousands of soldiers died during that. President Reagan ordered an invasion of Portugal. Because of World War III, the Supreme Court made a decision that Reagan was allowed to run for a third term, and that all future presidents could run for. Also, the British Prime Minister, I guess Margaret Thatcher, maybe it's probably not Margaret Thatcher, but it's probably Mosley. It's probably like Oswald Mosley or something. And now the liberation of Catalonia begins, and as finally, let's see. We've been going for an hour and a half. I guess we'll do that. The liberation of Denmark begins. The Kaiser has been doing something So everyone kind of got scared that East Prussia was going to conquer the world. Yeah, tiny East Prussia. I know. Puny East Prussia. The fall of the Fourth Internationale and the British-French alliance, the League of Powers, is now in full swing. As the leader of the Fourth Internationale had fallen. Similarly with Albania. The Great Liberation began. The invasion of Greece begins. Oh, what? Okay. Yeah, the blue team wins after a hard fought battle. The invasion of China. I mean, no, not the invasion. The liberation of China and Japan. The fall of that. So, as the American alliance, the United Nations push farther and farther. So East Prussia now became the strongest country in Europe, as so the invasion of the Middle East. The Middle East is invaded, and Iraq falls, Kuwait falls. And the Fourth International now is getting close to collapsing. Though the League of Powers has been kicked out of Europe, it is still lying in Asia. Vengeful. The second invasion of Sri Lanka begins. And the Pakistani Revolution. Begins. So in the 1980 U.S. presidential election, the United States elected, I guess George H.W. Reagan was elected to a third and fourth term, because we're now looking 1985-ish. The encirclement of forces in India begins. As Pakistani rebellion joins the United Nations. we'll just leave it on a cliffhanger because I have to eat.